All right, so let's talk a little bit about what I'm planning to build. So I'm building an app that's called Plotwise, and this is a land development app that's meant for two types of users. One is the commercial user, the land developer, the smaller developer who doesn't have the time or resources to right away get a full-blown feasibility study that can cost anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000. So, for example, if you find a piece of commercial property that you think storage unit facilities would fit on, Plotwise, by putting in an address, will tell you the zoning, the setbacks, the height restrictions, if you can build storage on there, what kind of storage can you build, or what other types of property can you put on there. It will give you, if it's a floodplain, it will tie to those resources. It will give you any topography that we can find. So we're going to connect to a lot of different databases that normally you would pay a consultant thousands and thousands of dollars to help research for you. So we're going to try and pull all of that together into one app that's driven solely by the address of the property, and be able to give a investor a go or no go decision with all of that data and information that's really, really important, but also a rough schematic of what you can build. So a footprint, so let's say it's 300 storage units. Based on what we see, we're going to kind of put a rough formation of a floor plan together so that you can take it to an architect to cut your costs down that way, but also renderings. So you'll be able to go to him based on feedback that you give the app and what you tell Plotwise, the style and the look, the feel, is it 2-story, 1-story, etc., and be able to give some renderings so that you can have a conversation with your architect, your surveyor, your planner, the city, etc., and have that visual to cut your costs, cut your time, and get your project going that much faster, because you're not waiting on a feasibility study that can take a month. So that's the concept of Plotwise, is you're doing on the spot feasibility studies, at least to a point where you have a solid go or no go decision, and then can go and speak with your city planners, your architect, your surveyors, and tie up all the loose ends and do it in a much shorter time frame, and maybe even before you have to commit to the property and really put in a lot of money that you may not be able to get back. All right, so now that you have an idea what the project is that I'm going to build, what have I done so far? So based on the rules of the hackathon, I cannot code. I couldn't have started coding until yesterday, which was Friday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I have until May 1st to do all of the project, make sure it's functional, and do a video to turn in to be judged. So what have I done, and what was I allowed to do? I was able to find my name, create my brand. I was able to secure my domain. I was able to go in and research the data sources that I need for my project. So things like Municode and the FEMA website to determine floodplain, all of the things that I want to plug in, at least for phase 1 MVP. I was able to do that research. I laid out a plan to go into, so I'm going to use Claude Code and Lovable, as well as some other platforms, to kind of tie all this together and be able to kind of create a work plan, a path to get where I need to be. And I think, so I was able to kind of do a lot of the legwork. You just couldn't start the coding. So that's what I'm going to start tomorrow, which is Sunday. And I've got the rest of the week to pull all of this together. Now, I don't see all of the functionality happening in phase 1. I think that's just too much for me as I learn more and more about Claude Code. But I'm feeling confident that I'm able to structure a great user interface functionality that will make a value add project or a value add product to somebody, especially an investor, and be able to turn it in and be proud of it. And then obviously there's phase 2 and phase 3. So let's talk about who my primary customers are, because that's part of the initial conversation of how I'm going to build this and what's the value add that I give to them with this app. So I've got two people or two groups that I'm focusing on when it comes to land development, right? You've got that single family residential client that is looking to find the perfect piece of land and build their dream house. So PlotWise can help in that scenario in terms of finding a piece of land, what's the zoning, how many square feet can you build on that, what's the height restriction, setbacks, all of that can be thrown into PlotWise. But more importantly, it'll help with the fun part of sketching out a preliminary floor plan and maybe some visuals that will align with their dream home. It won't be perfect, but it will give them enough of a rendering, color, style, placement of the garage and placement of the driveway to be able to go to an architect or a builder and say, I like this, I don't like this, I want to change that. So again, it's a little bit of a sales tool, to be honest, for realtors that sell land, to be able to visualize or help a potential buyer visualize what can be put on the property pretty quickly and pretty inexpensively. So that's one big group, right? Residential homes are a huge pocket for this, and realtors in particular, architects in particular, those are people that I think would use PlotWise as a preliminary blush of what you want to do on a piece of land for a house. The second is commercial builders. So the same concepts of land development come with storage units, come with multifamily, come with retail and industrial build outs. So what we're going to start with is storage. And why storage? Because it's simple, right? You have so many square footage that you can put in on a piece of land. And so then it becomes, well, how many 10 by 10s and how many 10 by 20s? And that's a function of looking at the competitive market and what people are renting out in other storage facilities. And PlotWise will do some of that work. It will go out and do a competitive analysis for you and kind of give you a recommendation about what you think is the best footprint for number of units and type of units. But if it's 300 units and you know how many square boxes you're going to fit into this footprint, that becomes easy math, and that becomes easier to build for an MVP versus anything else. And so storage is where we're going to start, and it's also what prompted the development of this app to begin with. So where did the concept of PlotWise come from? So 4 years ago, we bought a piece of land. So where did the concept of PlotWise come from? Why am I diving into trying to solve problems for builders and developers and feasibility studies? 4 years ago, we decided we wanted to be in the storage unit business. We couldn't find a facility that we could afford or liked, and a piece of land kind of popped up on my radar in an area that we had done some renovation in. And it was a rundown area at the time we were working there, but when I came back several years later, it had changed. There was lots of people moving in, nice houses being built, commercial, retail, movie theaters, Walmart, all of the foundational things that you want to see for an area that's growing was there. But there were no storage units around, at least for 3 miles, and that's a big red flag. That's an underserved market. And so I thought I had kind of seen something that hopefully, would be a while before somebody else noticed, and it was the last quadrant of San Antonio that was just being renovated and regentrified and kind of built out. So we scurried and bought this land for $375,000 with some investors, and right away started writing big checks. A pre-feasibility study ran us $1,500 just to validate validate my assumptions that yes, there were no facilities within 3 miles, and that here was a basic footprint in terms of getting away with, I think 420 units was what we had figured was the max that we could put onto this piece of land, and gave me some pricing, but it was just a pre-feasibility study, and that cost us $1,500. And then we had to pay for a survey that was $500 or $5,000, and then we had soil analysis and tree surveys done, and easement and electrical, and where was the retaining pond going to at the architectural fees. It just was check after check, and we went ahead and had a full feasibility study, and that ran us $7,500. Lots of money goes into scouting land development use, and a lot of it can take months. In our case, it took 8 months to get to a point where we had solid plans to submit to the city for permitting. By then, other competitors had seen what I had seen, and they moved faster because they had more money and more resources, and all of a sudden big facilities were already permitted and being built, foundations were being laid, interest rates started to move on us. We just were not a priority for some of our vendors, in particular our architect, who we love and did an awesome job, but we were a small project, and we just didn't, he did the best he could to kind of keep us at the forefront, but it took time, and time is your enemy when it comes to development. We were no longer, first mover. So at the end of it, we sold the land, gave everybody their money back, and we took a hit of over $100,000 in due diligence cost. And so plot-wise, and I know I'm not the only one, I know developers and investors go through this every single day. That typical real estate investor who is driving for dollars, the smaller guy who doesn't want to spend $8,000 on a feasibility study, but finds a great piece of land that he wants to put in a contract, will forego a lot of this due diligence just for any number of reasons. And so I wanted to create a piece of software so I wanted to create the solution that got rid of the guessing game earlier in the process, and it gave you a pretty instantaneous vision of what you could do with the property, what's the zoning, what's the setbacks, what are the height restrictions, is it a floodplain, all of the things that would take you several hours to do on your own, let alone to pay a consultant for. Give it to you pretty quickly, along with a feasibility study of competitive analysis and renderings and a floor plan, and enough to make a go or no go decision, enough to get 10 times more comfortable with buying a piece of land and taking that to the experts to sum it all up, validate everything that's in plot wise, and take it to the next level with actual architectural plans, getting your surveys done, everything. So it is a pre-feasibility study that's done pretty instantaneously and for pennies on the dollar compared to what you would spend to go down a rabbit hole and ultimately have to walk away because the land use just didn't make any sense anymore. All right, so I spent a lot of time talking about the problem that I want to solve. And the reason is, my thing is I want people to understand. So I spent a lot of time talking about the problem that I want to solve and how I'm going to build that app with Plotwise. And I say that because I want people to understand that the advantage to working with AI and automation and a lot of these tools that are now accessible to everybody is you're able to take your years and decades of knowledge in your field. For me, it's real estate, but for you, it could be medical, it could be home services, whatever it is that you have put your blood, sweat, and tears into. And you now have that years of experience in your head. you can translate that into these app development, the software, with a little bit of grit and some determination. You can build things now for $100, $200 that would have normally cost $30,000 to $50,000 plus a short 2 years ago. So tools like Claude Code, tools like Lovable, Claude Cowork, Google's getting into this. There's all kinds of tools out there now that you can do coding with no coding experience, and you do it through natural language. So it's not all about learning the techie side of things. If you can speak to a microphone and you can follow directions, you can build stuff like this. I don't have a coding background. I'm learning as I go, and there's YouTube University, there's stuff on my page. I'm going to do more training, but I want business owners, successful business owners who have worked hard to pull that knowledge base into their head and be able to translate it to solve problems in their own business and be able to monetize that, right? If you have the problem of logistical problems in your plumbing business, well, guess what? There's 100 other plumbers in the state of Texas who probably have the same problem you do. And if you can build a solution, that's a side hustle for you. And so what I want people to know is, this is AI for the pre-AI generation. We didn't grow up with it. I remember learning DOS in high school, but I'm not going to be left behind by not learning this stuff. It's not going anywhere. I can see how easy it makes a lot of my work done on a daily basis. And I want other successful business owners to understand that this is another tool that's not meant to replace you, but is meant to help you move the needle forward. All right, so what's first for tomorrow? So tomorrow is Sunday, and I'm going to spend the majority of the day working on this. We're going to set up the scaffolding in Claude Code and kind of set the stage for all of our folders and all of the things that we're going to do. I've done a lot of this legwork before, which we were allowed to do based on the rules, and then tomorrow we're going to start coding. So hang in there with me. Tomorrow gets to be more fun. I'll start showing you some of the visuals and some of the branding and some of the use cases that we're going to be doing with this. So hang in there.